So I'm curious, current day, if you were to describe how we do catechesis now in our churches, and when I say that, I mean, just kind of a typical Mennonite church, say,
Yeah.
here in
Well,
North America,
yeah.
right? What would you say? Like, how actually do we do this? What would be an example of that?
Well, when somebody says, in most of our churches, there are a few, I think, that baptize immediately and don't do any.
Interesting.
There are some that do educate because look at the Bible and it doesn't say they were taught beforehand. But I would think that the majority of our conservative Anabaptists still have instruction class, I think. Now, that's a good start. And I think the things that are used, I know that in my own setting, the book we used had the Apostles' Creed. Now, I don't know exactly if they used it because I got into the class halfway through, and that was at the beginning of the book. So I don't know what they did with it, but it was there. And then we looked at the Dordrecht Confession of Faith, which for most Beachy churches, that is what we would say is our confession of faith. And so we looked, and the really important things are basically there. Now, I have to admit, I prefer Schleitheim over Dordrecht. And so if I were the person making decisions, I would say, well, we'll do Dordrecht, but we're going to do Schleitheim first.
Schleitheim is great.
Yeah, Schleitheim is great. But regardless, both of those confessions of faith, Schleitheim focuses on where we're different than the Catholics and the Protestants. Dordrecht includes some things like we're Trinity. We're Trinitarians. We believe in the Trinity, which Schleitheim doesn't say, but it's clear that they believed it. But that was just it. It wasn't there was no conflict there. So they dealt with the things where there was conflict, like who do you baptize? Do we participate in government? Do we participate in the military? Things like that. Yeah. Those are all included in Dordrecht, but Dordrecht then also says we believe God created everything from nothing, therefore it's good. We believe that God is Trinity, et cetera. So they also talked about things where they agreed with the Catholics and the Protestants. So that's good. I like the clarity, I think, of and in some places the length of the Schleitheim. Like Schleitheim, when it's talking about non-resistance and non-participation in government, it's really clear.
But currently, like, would those be used in our instruction classes and things? You're saying Dordrecht would be?
Dordrecht, at least some places.
But so I'm curious on this, though, because you mentioned in the early church, you said you gave the number 3 years that they were in this process, or up to 3 years, right? I don't know of any Mennonite program really, where they'd have catechesis for 3 years before they would baptize someone.
We should.
Okay.
Now, once again,
you have to explain.
I lost everybody at that moment.
Please tell me more, because I've heard all over the map, but the one I've heard a lot is, well, let's just baptize them immediately, and we'll figure out the teaching, as they mature, right, in Christ. Or the other one's like, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. But you're saying we should do 3 years something.
It should be more extensive.
Okay.
And the age should be higher maybe than what some churches allowed.
Oh boy, tell me more.
Well, wait.
Okay.
So I'm not saying it should be 3 years.
Okay.
The early church didn't say that. They said it could be up to 3 years. It depends on how you feel, the person who's a candidate for baptism, how the ministers feel, and how the patron feels. Do these people all say, yeah, he's really changed. He really gets it.
Oh, it's like you need to be measuring this person more extensively to make sure that they are actually ready.
Yes. And it doesn't have to take 3 years. It could, but it doesn't have to.
Why should we take it that seriously?
Because it's so important. Look, one of the things that I am utterly convinced of is how hard it is to change a person from paganism to Christianity. From secular materialism, that's paganism too, to real Christianity. And somebody that's been raised in our setting, who's been raised rather laxly about what you believe, well, as long as you love Jesus, that's all that matters. Once again, which Jesus? What does that mean for you? So I think we need to take this seriously, and I'll tell you why from my own experience. I have had several people tell me who joined church as teenagers, somewhere in the teenage years, say, oh, but I didn't understand what this really meant. In other words, I didn't realize I was putting myself under the discipline of the church.
Okay,
But
you mentioned a couple things that we
yeah.
should make it more extensive. You also suggested the age might be a factor there too. Like maybe that relates to some
It
of the things
relates to
you're
what I
saying.
just said.
Tell me more on that one.
Well, actually, the guys that have talked to me like this,
Mm.
they would say their excuse for saying, I don't really want to do this anymore, this particular thing,
Mm.
is I didn't understand it then. So let's say it may or may not be this, but let's say that the church says I should dress a certain way. Okay, for some people it would be that. They would say, I wasn't old enough, I didn't get it. Okay, well, let's make sure you're old enough so that you really get it.
Mm.
And if you're young, but you really get it, see, that's another thing. I'm not going to say a fast age necessarily, but if you really get it, the ministers are convinced, your family is convinced, you're convinced. That's one thing. And if you come from a different tradition, if the person that you first got to know, that would be your patron. If that person feels really good about what he sees and the ministers do, and you feel ready, that's good. However, I think the age matters because I think this is more important than marriage. And we usually wouldn't let a 13-year-old get married.